Shabbat Shalom again to you. I hope it is peaceful and happy. We are so delighted to be here, and we are so delighted to welcome Rabbi Rick Jacobs from the Union of Reformed Judaism. The URJ, I'll speak briefly about the organization that Rick leads with such esteem and excellence. The URJ is a very important and diverse movement of Jewish people in North America and throughout the world, really. There are liberal Jews, progressive Jews, and here in America, I think 1.5 million people are Reformed Jews, and there's 900 congregations in North America. So we're one of those 900. So Rick, you must have a very busy travel schedule. If you're going to cover all those 900, I don't know how long it will take you to get to all 900, if that's even doable in a career, but we are very privileged and blessed that you are here. This esteemed organization that you are blessed and privileged to lead, and we're blessed and privileged to have you lead, is truly an open and progressive movement that makes Judaism as accessible as possible to its constituents. One of the things we learned at our recent biennial convention in Orlando, and there were 6 of us, right? Raise your hand if you were at the biennial. Judy and Beth, right? The Bermans, thank you. The Friedmans from Beth Israel, yes. Who else am I missing? Harriet, Janice, very good. Anybody else? Well, it was a privilege to be with you. The first time in the decade I've served Kol Haverim that I was so blessed to be with so many of you. And we had a great time building community. And one of the things that we learned were several things that are at the core of the URJ's priorities and at the core of Rabbi Jacobs' efforts to lead the Union of Reformed Judaism and the Reform movement. One is strengthening congregations, making sure that we are as vital and visionary as we move into the 21st century as possible. The other is audacious hospitality. Can you say that? Audacious hospitality, right? This is not just welcome. This is like super duper welcome. This is like making sure that we remember always, in all seriousness, that we were created B'Tselem Elohim in God's image, and therefore each of us possesses intrinsic worth. And so anybody that comes through these doors needs to be treated with respect, welcomed, because they're created in God's image and are full of intrinsic worth. This is a big-time responsibility. It's audacious. It's bold. It means we have to be always ready to welcome people into our midst and lower that threshold that sometimes can get in the way of people feeling at home. Last but not least, Tikkun Olam, healing the world, social justice. We, created in God's image, have profound power to make a difference, to be a force for good, to make the world a better place, to heal that which is broken. It is our fundamental responsibility as Jews to bring wholeness to the world. And so, Rick, it's amazing that you support this day in, day out and help so many other people. That's the amazing part. It's not so amazing because you're a mensch and you're a visionary. And since I've known you, since I was a rabbinic student, since I got to visit you at your house, right? And we're going to talk about that a little later. We had some fun and we connected in a very wonderful way around baseball. So we'll talk a little bit. I don't want to give away any secrets at this point. A few things later to talk about. But I would like to say about you, Rick, that you've been a role model for we rabbis, for we lay leaders. You served 20 years at Westchester Reform Temple in Scarsdale, right? 20? Yeah, it's 2 decades. You are the longest-serving congregational rabbi to become president of the URJ. So you have an intimate understanding of what it's like to create systems of lifelong learning and help adults and children dive in deeply into meaningful learning. And your commitment to justice is unparalleled, and your commitment to Israel is transcendent. And so we're lucky to have you. And we're lucky to have you on its face, but we're also lucky to have you as we celebrate 30-plus years as a vital and loving congregation. So, Rick Jacobs, please.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for that beautiful and gracious and loving and warm introduction and the way in which you lead this congregation. And the spirit in this congregation is pretty awesome. Pretty awesome. What a treat and privilege it is for me to be here to celebrate this wonderful milestone. Think of a handful of families deciding there needs to be a synagogue right here. What it takes to get something started is something different than what it requires to sustain something. So to the founders, I hope you feel a great sense of pride and great sense of having done something important for the wider community. We know in the Jewish tradition that we have a beautiful teaching in the Pirkei Avot. It says, Da me'ayin bata u'la'an ata holech. Know where you come from, but most importantly, know where you're going. So I'd love tonight at this wonderful milestone to take some time, not so much to look backward at these 30 years, but to also take a chance and look ahead. Where are we? Where we're going? Now, I'd like to actually look even beyond the 30 years, beyond the 140 plus years since Reform Judaism got planted here in North America. In 1873, the whole thing got started with a man named Isaac Mayer Wise who said, like the founders of Kol Haverim, we ought to have a reform movement here. And he built it with grit and with imagination and with lots and lots of hard work. And it has grown and it is flowering. But I want to go past those 140 years. I'd like to go all the way back to the beginnings. And of course, we know we have the book of Genesis about families, but we're now in Exodus. It's about how to become something larger, more able to take on and shape a world. So the Jewish people needed a leader back in the beginning of Exodus, and sometimes you have primaries to find the right leader. And sometimes there are a lot of people who want to be the leader. And that was true, by the way, in the time of Moses. There are all these people who just kind of waving their arms saying, pick me, God, pick me. I'll lead the Jewish people. But God looked at all those people in the primary and said, no. God said, I got to find someone who has that something extra. So God looked all around. He finds this guy named Moses. What was it about Moses? Was he the guy who wanted it the most? Was he the one who had the fanciest resume? No, Moses got the call because whenever he saw a person in need, he had to respond. When he saw an Egyptian beating an Israelite, he couldn't watch. He had to dive in and help. When he saw a group of shepherds accosting this shepherdess at a well in Midian, he had to simply step in. Our teacher Moses is picked because he's a man of character, of Musar. What did you talk about at Institute at Eisner? He's a person who embodied those values, and he's the one who has led us. It also tells us that that's what religious leaders have to have. So I want to say in front of all you nice people that your rabbi has those qualities. He is a person of character, of depth, of vision, of kindness, all those good, important things. They brought Moses into leadership. That's how your rabbi came to be your rabbi. And as he said, I've known him a couple of years. And I just have to say that there was an induction into the Hall of Fame this week of baseball. I don't know if you caught that, Rabbi Marantz. I imagine you might have missed some other news, but I'm pretty certain you wouldn't have missed that news. And the one person who I was particularly struck was inducted was Mike Piazza. Now, why was Mike Piazza, besides being a Met, I do live in New York, but it wasn't that. What's amazing about Mike Piazza, first of all, he was too tall to be a catcher. And not only was he a great catcher, he hit more home runs than anybody who's ever played that position, just shy of 400 home runs. So what I take away from that is he was not just an all-star, but someone to be in the Hall of Fame because he had all those different facets of the game. So, Rabbi Marantz, you are, in fact, an all-star. A teacher, a preacher, a chaplain, an educator, a person who has all those things wrapped in one. So it's no accident that you find yourself at the helm of a great congregation, had a chance to get to know some of your lay leaders too. And boy, you are blessed. I was at the Scheitz seminar and got a chance to meet Howie and had a chance to before the services tonight, get a sense of some of your leaders. And I know the educator here very well. I think Rabbi Marantz, you know her very well too. So I see all these qualities of leadership in the lay and the professionals, and you have a synergy that will allow you to go places that, frankly, other congregations won't be able to go. So I want to just share with you a story that frames what I'd like to tell you in just a very brief few minutes tonight. So I was in a hurry in New York City the other day. Has anyone in Connecticut ever been in a hurry? Is that just a New York thing? Do you know what I'm talking about? Okay. Okay, it is a New York thing. So I was really in a hurry, and I was moving down Broadway. I had to go all the way to the tip of Manhattan for a meeting. And I looked at my watch, I looked at the crowd on the sidewalk, and it just didn't look good. And I looked to my right, there's an African-American man. To my left, there's a Latina woman. And you know what? They're in a hurry, too. We're all moving really fast. And I'm looking at my watch and the crowd, and I'm thinking, I just better run. So I picked up the pace, and I'm jogging down. They start jogging. I don't know these people at all. But they're in a hurry, too, and they're moving downtown. And then all of a sudden, I see them. They are blocking the street. It's just literally blocked by this giant Winnebago just trailer, the Chabad mitzvah tank. I think, really, today, on this sidewalk, you have to... So I thought maybe I'll just duck down a side way and go around. And I said, no, you're a Jewish leader. Don't duck down the side way. Just go right down. So the three of us are moving right towards the Chabad rabbi. He sees the three of us, and he picks me out. And he says to me, "Excuse me, are you Jewish?" And I said, "Yes." Are you? The man, he could not speak. He started to point to his seat. Then he pointed to his black fedora. Then he pointed to his beard. He just kept pointing. And I said, well, appearances are not always reality. And I kept walking. Can I tell you something? I know this to be a fact. He's still standing there. But why do I tell you this story? I don't tell you this story because I have anything less than deep love and respect for Chabad. I happen to be a very close colleague with Rabbi Yehuda Krinsky, who leads Chabad. I tell you that story because that nice rabbi had an out-of-date understanding of who we are. How in the world, in the 21st century, did he look at the three of us and think that I was the only Jewish person? In this day and age, I could have been the one person who was not Jewish. There's no way to judge looking at somebody, finding out their name, and saying, you must be or you must not be. We have a moment where we are an incredibly diverse Jewish community. Do you know that between 10 and 20% of our people are Jews of color? Do you know that 1 out of 5 of us is a person with disability? Do you know that many of us are from backgrounds that are not Jewish? And we have so many different people. I want to talk to you tonight about how we can grow. And I don't want to just grow larger, though you should know which is the largest movement in Jewish life, the Reform movement. And I don't do this in a boastful way. I just want you to know the fact. We are larger than the Orthodox, conservative, Reconstructionist movements combined. It doesn't make us better. It makes us larger. And we are growing because not just that we are audaciously hospitable and welcoming in, but we are finding the strength in that diversity. We're bringing in people from different backgrounds, some more traditional Jewish backgrounds, some from outside the Jewish people. But what's amazing is that we're actually bringing strength to our people. So my message tonight is we grow larger and grow deeper in our connection. When we do those two together, we will be able to not just survive, not just hang on, but we will be able to grow and face the future with a new sense of hope and possibility. It's a pretty simple message, but it's not so simply accomplished. And I want to just suggest that there's some key ways for us to, in a sense, update how we think about not just our movement, but our people and our work. So when we think today about why many people are not involved in Jewish life, and by the way, all the big demographers say that in America, lots of people don't want anything to do with being religious. Why is that? Because for us today in America, oftentimes being religious means being intolerant, being closed-minded, being against science and modern thought. And so if you think about many of the things that repel people from the world of religion, we're not a faith that is about those qualities. We are a faith that's about inclusion. So when many people in the Jewish world did this to interfaith families, you were created in 1984. 1983, Rabbi Alexander Schindler changed the Jewish trajectory by talking about patrilineal descent. In 1978, he said, instead of doing this to interfaith families, why don't we do this? Why don't we bring them close? So we have been able to turn the phrase of intolerance to inclusion, from closed-minded to always updating and evolving and keeping current and fresh and alive, and being passionate and being serious and being incredibly inspired by what we gain from our tradition. So I want to share with you some of these core ways in which we do that work. And when I look around Kol Haverim, you know what I see? I see you being incredibly vibrant and alive in these core areas. So what was Jewish life like 30 years ago? It was not at all what it's like today. And that is the challenge of an anniversary. It's a challenge to think about how we can continually reinvent who we are. When I was driving up to Kol Haverim, you know the drive from New York, and I couldn't help but slow down as I passed Newtown, Connecticut. And remember that 3 years ago, December 14th, all of us were just stunned that in our country, such bloodshed could take place in an elementary school, literally 1 hour from where we're seated here. I know it must have been much closer to home for all of you than for much of America, let alone the world. I want to tell you that when our movement experienced that, we didn't just feel sadness. We said, let us take a leadership role. So the day after Newtown, we gathered an interfaith coalition across the entire spectrum. My job was to call evangelical leaders and see if they would come stand with us, and they did. And to have Roman Catholics and Muslims and Hindus and Buddhists and Orthodox Jews and Reform Jews and secular, and to stand together and say, we don't have the exact solution, but we know this is not the way. Our voices did not soften over these last years. We not only raised our voices, but God bless NIFTY, the North American Federation of Temple Youth, made reducing gun violence their #1 priority this year. And we actively brought people from across the political and religious spectrum and said, we're going to stay on this. Earlier this week, when President Obama announced his executive order, it was in many ways a response to what he had experienced, but what many of us, and I'm going to say that our ability to galvanize a voice of conscience made a difference. The movement to think about smart guns was led by Rabbi Joel Mosbacher, one of our Reform colleagues, and do not stand idly by. This is an example of Reform Judaism saying we're not just a wonderful community to think and to pray. We have a job to do. God called us to help shape a more just and compassionate world, and we've got to do that wherever we find ourselves. So I think that we have an example of what it's like to do this holy work, what it's like to actually take Jewish values and put them into practice. So one of the ways that we do that is with you heard these beautiful testimonies. I wish I had, you got a camera there, so I'm going to ask for some of that tape afterwards, because I heard beautiful testimony about the things that actually work to shape Jewish identity and Jewish connection. Let me share a story about one of those camps. Not the camp that's nearest, but I am incredibly proud of Kol Haverim for sending probably more young people to our summer camps and to other Jewish summer camps that I'm going to say per capita, I think you're at the head of the class. And I think that's visionary because we know that those summers change and shape Jewish lives. So you may not know that last week our camp in Bruceville, Texas, was just near Waco, Texas. Did something that surprised some people, but it didn't surprise us. During the winter in Texas, the camp isn't always so busy. But it's full right now. We don't have a single bed that's free. Who's in those beds right now at Bruceville? The people who are in that are children from Central America. Okay, they're caught in the United States debate about immigration reform. And by the way, there is legitimate debating to be done. But we said while you're debating, those kids should not be in some shelter somewhere or out on the street. We want them in our house. So almost 600 of them are in our Reformed Jewish summer camp in Waco, Texas. And they're eating the beautiful food. They're outside in that beautiful amphitheater where we pray. And they are feeling the sense of wholeness. Because while the politicians are debating, these kids need a safe place. I tell you that because teens from Green Family Camp this summer were in Central America. Can you imagine that? Doing something called Mitzvah Corps. They were in those very countries and saw with their own eyes and came home and said, we saw things that claimed us, that make us want to be activists in the world. So how do those kids feel knowing that their camp is a home to kids who have fled some of those very same countries? It's a virtuous circle that brings us around. I tell you that story because we know that young leaders can help shape lives, not only for themselves and their families, but the world around them. So we think about Reform Judaism, it's about all the things you know and love and more. And when we think about how we're going to change the trajectory, we're going to do it with things, the immersives that Rabbi Marantz talked about. The way in which you have this vibrant, nifty chapter right here, Grizzly. Wow, what a great name for, a youth group, right? I was a little scared at first when I walked in. It said, you like to meet the kids from Grizzly? And I was a little bit nervous. And then you meet them, and how could you not fall in love with these young people? And to know that you not only have Zoe just coming back from EIE, the Eisendrath International Exchange, but that Alex is going in just a couple of weeks. That is a program where you spend a semester of your high school years. Well, you just don't ever forget that. It shapes your character. It shapes your worldview. So we think about the way in which camp connects to congregation. Congregation connects to youth. Youth connects to Israel. Israel connects to all the different parts of Jewish life. And what we're involved in is building infinite on-ramps into Jewish life and closing all the exits. Right? Can you imagine getting on a highway? You can always get on, but you can't get off. That's Jewish life. We want to... Once you get on, you just stay on. But it turns out that in congregations other than Kol Haverim, there is this huge problem after bar and bat mitzvah, right? There are plenty of kids who have their bar bat mitzvah, and by the time Ein Kelohenu is being finished, they are making their way very slowly and surely, And they're very appreciative and say, it's really been nice. But I'm gone. And they leave. 80% of North American Jewish B'nai Mitzvah, that's in the Reform, and I'm sure it's true in the Conservative, it's probably true in some of even the modern Orthodox, are gone by the time they hit high school. Your numbers are the absolute opposite. 80% of your B'nai Mitzvah stick around here. Why is that? Is that just because you happen to have a fabulous educator and a fabulous team of educators with her? That does help. That you have visionary rabbi, that you have visionary lay leaders who say, what can we do? You're part of something we in the Reform movement have built called the B'nai Mitzvah Revolution, which is to think about how do we rethink all parts of Bar Mitzvah from what you start, what you learn, what you do, and where it leads. And that we change the trajectory so that Hebrew school is not the thing you are escaping from, but Jewish engagement is the thing that calls you to be even more involved. And not to do it with a sense of obligation, but joy. And that you couldn't imagine not doing that. So when we think of how we're reshaping congregations that don't just think about audacious hospitality, but think, how do we even go find people in our community, not wait for them to come to our door? Who are the people who don't feel welcome? The LGBT community, right? Interfaith families, Jews of color. I'll go down the whole list. Those who once were involved and then left. Those who never were involved. Our opportunity is to build bridges of engagement and not to make formal membership the only thing that matters when we connect. That we are involved in shaping something larger. To think about what is the model for religious education. I've heard 5 times tonight rabbis say lifelong learning, right? The way in which learning is for each of us, not just for the pediatric department. So how do we do this work? How do we integrate it with spirituality that has the joy of this congregation and the spiritual depth? How do we connect all those parts and offer it widely and let people know what we're about? Our synagogues are not just 900, but they are reinventing themselves. They're bastions of innovation and creativity. And that's what gives us our strength. That's why we are the largest, because we are thinking differently and more effectively. And you, my friends, are one of the frontiers in our journey into this new way. You're pioneering the way in which we're going to get this done. You're part of something much larger, and I hope that you feel the strength of being part of a movement that does stand for something and does do critical holy work every day. My last message to you is, in that being part of something larger, we've got a huge responsibility and opportunity. So I was called by Prime Minister Netanyahu with a small group of Jewish leaders to come to Jerusalem just before Rosh Hashanah last year. And it was a little bit surprising. It was literally 3 days before Rosh Hashanah, but he said, we need to talk all together now. So I got myself over there, and I walked into Prime Minister Netanyahu's office. And he looked right at me, and he said, thank you. Well, my mom raised a young man who knows what to say when someone says thank you. What did I say? I said, you're welcome. But I then said, you know, Mr. Prime Minister, I'm grateful that you thank me, but I really don't know why you're thanking me. He said, well, I'll tell you why I'm thanking you. Because during the war in Gaza this summer, Natan Sharansky, the head of the Jewish Agency, told me that your movement had more young people in Israel during that war than any other movement in Jewish life. Thank you for your movement's deep commitment to the state of Israel. So that was quite something to hear. But it wasn't directed to me, it was directed to you. Just look at how many of your young people, how many of you are deeply connected to Israel. We are large not just for the sake of being large. We express that in really concrete, powerful ways to show the state of Israel, especially when they're facing difficult times, that we have our fate intertwined with theirs. So to think about all the people who sometimes haven't found that connection. I don't know if you know that Israel's president was just here. He's not necessarily the most well-known in American circles, but his name is Reuven Rivlin. Turns out that in 1989, Reuven Rivlin was a member of the Knesset, and he went to a Reform synagogue on a Friday night. And as he walked out of the synagogue, and a reporter from one of the Israeli papers said, Mr. Rivlin, what did you think of the service? And he said, quite simply, it was idol worship. So I take that to mean he didn't like it too much. He did not change his opinion of us up until a year ago when he was nominated to be the next president of Israel. And I said to myself, this guy cannot be the president of Israel and speak on behalf of all of us and have the attitude that he had. So I wrote an open letter to him in the Hebrew paper Haaretz, but I never heard from him. Natan Sharansky said, did you ever hear from, at that point, President-elect Rivlin? I said, never heard from him. He said, I'm going to make sure you meet. So Natan Sharansky set up a meeting in his office the day of the funeral of the 3 Israeli teens. It was the only day that worked, and we were all on our way to that funeral. By the way, probably the most painful ritual I've ever been a part of. So we sit down with President Rivlin, and at that point he's not yet president, but a week later he's going to be president. I said, we're going to this horrifically painful funeral. There are so many things that divide the Jewish people. I said, you don't have to agree with us. You don't have to love how we pray or study, but you've got to feel the same sense of responsibility for us that we feel for you. So can't you update how you think about us? He said, I'll think about it. And then he left. And then I'm on Metro North riding from my house to New York City, and my phone rings on the train. I don't know if in the Connecticut trains it's the same as the New York trains, but you're not allowed to talk on your cell phone. But I looked at my cell phone, it was from Israel, so I said, you know what, I'm taking this. I said, let him yell at me, that's okay. So I take the call, I say hello, and in this very heavy Israeli accent, I hear Rabbi Jacobs. He heretofore had not called one Reform rabbi, rabbi. So I just get this big grin. And then he says, slicha, excuse me, and I think he's going to take it back. It took him how many years, 1989, and he's going to take it back, and he said, slicha, and then he said, Harav Jacobs. For him to say Harav is what he would call the chief rabbi. Rabbi is respectful, but it's not at all close to what Harav, the Hebrew of rabbi, is. And then he spoke for 5 minutes about being ready to partner with us to shape a strong connection between the diaspora and Israel and to build Jewish unity. I started to cry. 3 weeks ago, he came to New York for his big first presidential visit, and I got to welcome him on behalf of the Reform movement that is partners with him. Why do I tell you that story? Because we have a role in helping to shape Israel. Israel is the most extraordinary creation probably in all of Jewish history, but right now it doesn't have such a good grasp on Jewish diversity. That's one of the things we can do. But we have to do it at a time where we express love and sometimes gentle critique. And that's okay, that's part of what we do. We're also working, anybody ever been to the Western Wall? Put your hand up, have you ever been to the Western Wall? Do you remember that there's a part for men, a part from women? If we showed up to try and pray the way we just prayed here, there's no chance we could do it. Well, a few years back, we said to the Prime Minister, that's not right. So we are this close to having, for the first time in Israel's history, the Reform, the Conservative, the Women of the Wall, and the federations to actually have oversight of a new egalitarian prayer space that will have equality and equal access as the traditional parts that exist there today. We're on the move. We're making changes. And we're bringing our young people who bring their love and commitment, and they're coming back. And we need to strengthen Israel, even as Israel is committed to make sure that we are strong. We have an opportunity, my friends, to be part of this larger narrative of the Jewish people. We're not just Reform. We're Jewish. And we're not just Jewish. We're God's people in the world, and we help to shape God's values and God's dream for the world. So if I leave you with the simple phrase that we're going to grow larger, anybody want to help us grow larger? Would you at Kol Haverim like to grow a little bit larger? It would be okay if some new people, but don't wait for them to come. Go find them and show them what you're about. Show them how you live the Jewish tradition in a contemporary way. Show them that being religious is not about being intolerant, closed-minded, opposed to philosophy and science. It's about the best of the human spirit. And when we live that, we will grow. And when our young people go off to camp and Nifty and Israel, and they deepen their connection, then we don't just grow larger, we grow deeper. And as the rabbi said, it's not just for the kids. It's for all of us to live a life of purpose and holiness. So at your 30th anniversary, can I say mazel tov? Mazel tov. It's a great milestone to reach. But as great as this milestone is, look with me ahead and think of what you could still become, the impact you could still have. So as great as this is, I tell you, my friends, the best is yet to come. Shabbat shalom.